You should play the one you sent me before. I like that.
Hey, you know what they saying, huh? Hey, you know what they saying, though? Hey, you know what they... Yeah.
Okay, now we got part of it.
Yeah. Hey.
It's going. All right, now we're getting some people in here. So we gotta get the music going.
With a passion, as I pull off in the Aston. Don't nobody like his ass, huh? Tried to cover up and tell the people, go Brandon.
We got Lauren Steiner.
But we know what they saying, though. You can hear the chant in every post. Don't nobody want this commie cause we not in China. Everybody hate a Trump and now they out to catch a body. That's what they get for treating us like we in Squid Games. Green light mandate like he's insane. These times people waking up to everything. Go Brandon, but we all know what the saying mean.
All right.
That was a good way in.
Yo, I've been listening to that nonstop. You're right, Russell. The other version of that song has some
the one
good
you sent
lyrics.
me. I like. Yeah,
I like the lyric. What's the lyric that they have? It's something about call assisted living, get your man back. Yeah. And then they said they rhyme man back with Amtrak. Yeah. It's great. There's a country Let's Go Brandon now. There's a rock Let's Go Brandon now. There's all kinds of Let's Go Brandon songs out there now. So lots of stuff.
I might actually write a piece on this because I've seen very few things that better symbolize to me how much the left has lost its subversive edge, how much we've given that away to the right. Because in the past that would have been a left thing. The thing that drives the right crazy, and then the left's gonna do more and riff on it, and they have that now.
I know. Well, that's exactly the point. Is like they're so much more fun than we are now. Like the left is just so miserable and dour and you're just like humorless. It's like something like that.
It's like ISIS. It's like ISIS.
Saying,
Let's go, Brandon. It's just like ISIS. Oh my God.
Elvira's watching. Elvira asked who's Brandon. So should we do the Let's Go Brandon thing now? Hey, Lauren, we got Lauren Steiner here too. So let me introduce everybody. We got Lauren Steiner here. We have James Nagy in the Chicago Cubs hat there, our most recent contributor to the blog. And of course, our pal Anish Shavani is here also. And you guys know Russell and I. So for the people who don't know the Let's Go Brandon thing, the way this came about is a race car driver. I think his name is Brandon Brown. I forget what his last name is. Anyway, it's a guy named Brandon won a race.
We're northern liberal elites. We don't know NASCAR.
Well, I had no idea what this thing was. And so what the Let's Go Brandon thing is this race car driver named Brandon won a race. And after the race was won, he was giving an interview to, I believe it was like an NBC affiliate or something like that.
It was NBC,
yeah. In the background was a group of people in the audience chanting what she said was "Let's Go Brandon." Of course, it wasn't. Here, let me just play the clip right now because I actually have it. I actually prepped that for tonight. So here's.
Watch out, you're gonna get accused of belonging to ISIS.
Well, listen, we got Anish Shavani and you on the stream, Russell. The FBI is going to be at my door before the end of the night either way.
Probably.
So we may as well.
They're going to take those beautiful children.
Thank you to all of our partners. Oh my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me.
So they're chanting "Fuck
as
Joe
you can
Biden."
hear the chants from the crowd. Let's go, Brandon. Brandon, you told me you were going to kind of hang back those first two stages and just watch and learn. What did you learn that helped you there in those closing laps?
Oh my God, it was.
This poor guy has to give the interview, hearing that in the background. Just won a race.
Stay to one, and everything shifted top.
So anyway, that's the genesis of the Let's Go Brandon thing, because I didn't even know what this was until pretty recently, but I love it. I think it's fantastic. It's great. In fact, if I were to vote today, I probably would have written in Brandon on at least a couple of.
Well, I sent you illegally because you're not supposed to take pictures. I sent you my write-in.
But then there was the follow-up where some guy on a pilot on a Southwest airline flight said it over the mic, and that's the part that's been getting all the pushback.
Well, when the plane landed, right?
when he said it, I'm not sure.
No,
Was it
I
when the
think
plane landed?
That was
I think they were coming in for a landing or
Well,
something. I
If
think
you
he
said
was
that
doing
right
his
before
closing
takeoff, that would make
remarks.
me a little nervous. But
Let me ask you guys,
if after
you-
you land the plane, I think it's fine.
Do you think they were saying fuck Joe Biden because they're right wingers in one of these NASCAR states, or are they saying it because they're disappointed progressives? Probably the former, right?
I would bet on the former if I had
Yeah.
to. If I had to bet.
Given the context, but I think what it's turned into is a commentary on just the whole shit sandwich that everyone is eating, and that's part of what the modern humorless left just lacks all sense of irony and absurdity. Like they just don't pick up on it. Like part of it is a commentary on that news commentator calling it's trying to cover it. Partly they're commenting on that, I feel.
Right.
Like-
a lot
like
of
it's-
it is
it's on the
antagonizing the
shallowness
media.
and hypocrisy of the whole system. It's just a commentary on the whole moment. And that's what I'm saying. It's sad because the left used to be the ones commenting on the zeitgeist. And now it's the right. And the left are the hall monitors losing their shit as they do it. You know,
Well-
they're the ones with the Guy Fawkes masks now.
Right.
Yeah. What was funny in that clip is the announcer just trying to act
Right.
as
Yeah.
nothing. That was more funny, obviously, than fuck Joe Biden. And I think the Southwest airline was 2 days before 2 days. So I think about 4 days ago. That's when I first heard about. I didn't know about Let's Go Brandon before that. I don't know how long that's been going on, but it was because of the pilot. And I think he said that upon departure. He was like, "Let's go, Brandon." And I don't know, how many of the people on the plane got it right away, but I guess everybody, it's great publicity, right? But this thing about the left doesn't have a sense of humor, we're not funny anymore, and the right's got a monopoly on that, or they're dominating that. We heard a lot of that 4 or 5 years ago with the alt-right, Milo,
Mhm.
those type of people. We were hearing that a lot, that they have a sense of absurd and they're funny and they get it. And then all these other alt-right affiliated groups that were certainly funnier than the left. And I guess to some extent that is true, because what is the left now except where you get a vaccine or you won't have a job and will kill you and you won't be part of public life, so get a vaccine. That's the left today. But I think also I'm not sure to what extent the right has also lost their interest in humor and sort of being more lighthearted and having this absurdist take on American life. I think a lot of that has gone away over the last 4 or 5 years. I think maybe on that side too, that's also disappeared. I don't know what you guys think about that. But it is.
Well, I think in 2016, like their candidate was Donald Trump. Like you have to kind of have a sense of humor about
Right.
yourselves if your candidate is Donald Trump. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like if your candidate's Mitt Romney, you can kind of be boring about it. But how
The
could you
January
not?
It was very, very funny, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that was an absurdist farce.
That's the peak of their absurdist drama. That was really, really, really funny. And if only the old left had said, "Wow, this is great. This is like Abby Hoffman. We can do this too. We will have January 25th now." But no, we took the Viking guy. And, but so maybe we need someone like, we need
Well,
Trump.
Michael Moore did write that editorial, that Substack piece about how the left is secretly envious about January 6th. And
Yeah,
really
I read
agree with
that.
Really? I didn't see that.
And
I didn't
heard
see it either. No.
and
I saw that.
he's a comedian, and I agreed with that, and I was thinking that myself, but God forbid anyone on the left should say that, because we're supposed to be condemning this as, insurrection and blah, blah, blah.
This was supposed to be like a third world type of coup. That's not
Right.
a coup. That was just funny. It's funny as hell. That's all it was. And now
Well-
that's
Look, the Democrats are the Tracy Flick party now.
right. They're going to take it all the way. Their goal is to take it all the way to 2024, right? This January 16th, because from 2017 to 2021 was Russia Gate. And now this is the
Right.
news.
Exactly.
for the
They
next
needed
year.
a new
Russia
thing.
is
Right.
dead. So
Exactly.
they need something like that, some sense of saying, if you do not believe in these ideological things that we've set up, including all the cultural things and the woke shit, then you are a traitor. You are committing treason. So this is a second form of treason, Russiagate, and this just goes into it. January 16th is a form of treason.
January 6th. But let me say this. I posted when Robert Kagan wrote his article in the Washington Post. It was an opinion piece called The Constitutional Crisis. I have to say, I despise this neocon, but I agree with what he is saying is going to happen. He basically started his article by saying Trump was going to win in 2024, and the Republicans were going to take over for the next several generations because they were going to continue with their gerrymandering project. They were going to continue with their assault on voting rights. And they're working on other things too, which is to take these nonpartisan Secretary of State positions in every state that is Republican and make them partisan. Not only that, make the election officials in the different localities, make them partisan. They're doing the same with judges, taking a nonpartisan judicial race and requiring that they declare their party, because what they're trying to do is get people to vote from Trump, that don't know the names of the judges and generally leave them off, to just vote straight down Republican Party line. So while I do think that his premise to say we're not going to have a democracy anymore, because we already know we don't have a democracy, we have an oligarchy, we are going to have these technical things that make us a democracy, the structure, if you will, could be irrevocably jeopardized. So I don't want to make too much of a joke about the threat of fascism, because I do think it's real, regardless of what you want to say about January 6th, which I don't necessarily know I agree with you.
I think
about.
Biden and that bunch are the real fascists. That's a whole different discussion. But I also disagree. I didn't read that editorial, but I would not want to blame the impending loss, which we can all kind of feel is coming in 2024 and 2022 to Trump or someone else. And I guess Virginia tonight with Youngkin will be a good test of that, where that's going. But instead of blaming it on gerrymandering and judges and secretaries of state, which are all sort of institutional factors that could go into enhancing something more fundamental going on. And my response to that would be, which Keaton and Russell have been, you guys have been doing this, you've been at it for a few weeks now, is if the Democrats don't give you anything, if there is nothing that you have seen, less than nothing in response to this pandemic, and 10 months have gone by, that's the real explanation, is that when you get nothing, this is why people went, instead of leaning toward Bernie Sanders, toward Trump in 2016, and now they're going to move back to it again. Whatever scary scenario put out there in terms of January 6th or insurrection, the Democrats are not giving people anything at all. And it makes sense for them to move to the other side. And I would want to look at that more than these explanations are, which are all valid to an extent, but they're not the primary reasons why our so-called great democracy is not functioning the way it should.
Well, you're right, Anis. And if I could just butt in and just first vouch for Lauren a bit, because she has been on that page too. She's been doing a great job covering all of this stuff in terms of the infrastructure bills. And I just, now that we're getting a little bit of a crowd filing in here, I just want to tell everybody that this is an open mic election party. So I have pasted the invite link, the Zoom invite link, into the comments section right there. I will paste it again in just a moment. Everybody is welcome to call into the show, patrons and non-patrons alike. We hope if you're not a patron, you will sign up at patreon.com/Due Dissidence to help us do more of these things. I had to pay Anis a fuck ton of money to be here tonight. So, they should support us.
Denise doesn't do anything for free.
Right, exactly. And also, Lauren, I will let you respond, but since this is election night, we are monitoring the situation here. We got our first batch of results in with 1% of Virginia's precincts reporting Glenn Youngkin at 68% to McAuliffe's. Now it just moved. Glenn Youngkin at 70% to McAuliffe's 29%.
That doesn't mean anything.
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go,
Hey,
Brandon.
I called it for Youngkin a couple of weeks ago,
Well,
but
let me say this,
they
guys.
probably have only counted like, you know,
So
the-
far,
the-
it's
the,
so
like
far there's
20
no
MAGA hat
surprises there, of
wearing
course. Right.
voters.
Let me say this
Yeah,
to
let's
Anise,
let
because-
Lauren in.
Because Anise made the point that I've been making since 2017. I was a Bernie delegate and we went to the convention. Bernie had promised us a contested convention. And 2 weeks earlier, he endorsed Hillary. And I wrote an article in the LA Progressive saying, Bernie, don't do it. Because we were really pissed and we did a whole bunch of protests and everything like that. But I remember we were still trying, even though Bernie had given up, to get super delegates to switch. And we had polls from Real Clear Politics showing that Bernie beat Trump, okay, and the electoral map. So I've been on that page. And even in April of 2017, I stood up at Ted Lieu's town hall where he was, in the beginning of 4 years of Russiagate and Trump baiting. I mean, he became one of my representative in California. Now, of course, I have Madison Cawthorn, one of the insurrectionist architects. But Ted Lieu was beating the drums for Russiagate and being Trump's chief antagonist. That's all he did for 4 years. And I stood up in that town hall where I got heckled by a bunch of Hillbots because I said that if the Democratic Party didn't provide some material benefits for people, they would lose in 2022. And, he was talking about Carter Page, and I even talked about the Time magazine article called Yanks to the Rescue, which showed how the US sent over advisors to run Boris Yeltsin's campaign. So if you want to talk about countries interfering in other people's elections, that was
Well, of course.
right. So he started talking about Carter Page.
We also broke our promise to the Russians not
yeah.
to expand NATO up to their borders.
Yes, many times. Those were the promises that he made, FDR made to Stalin in Yalta. But what I was going to say is, this whole Carter Page thing, he was talking about that. He loved every single smoking gun. And recently, Matt Taibbi, who wrote a book, Hate Incorporated, all about this Russiagate bullshit, he showed how that was a big nothing burger. But I was actually wrong, because the Democrats did win in the midterms and they still haven't given, the people very much. So what do you guys say to that? I mean, do you think it's just the historic thing where the out party, wins in the midterms or what?
I mean, for me personally, I think we're repeating the trajectory of the ancient democracies. We're in the death throes of this particular democratic experiment. The system has become so corrupted that it just doesn't work anymore. And it's going to be for historians to figure out why this particular democracy failed. I think at this point, there are a lot of factors that have just compounded. I think one of the most interesting ones is, I think what we're seeing partly is that a democracy can only function as long as there's some common agreed upon set of principles governing people of all ideological stripes, that there are certain bedrock principles, a certain bedrock belief in democracy, a certain idea that there is an ideal that is transcendent of winning any particular political argument, that we all have certain common values. And those values have really been lost. And it seems that no matter how you build the system, and certainly America was built with flaws in the system from the beginning, but we were able to work with those flaws because there was some agreed upon set of rules. And once that breaks down, once the people just become suspicious and mistrustful of each other, I mean, they just released a poll recently, and I think this has been the case for a while now. Americans believe that the greatest threat to democracy are people with their opposite numbers in the other party. You can't, at that point, anything is justified, right? Because the other people aren't just your political opponents, they're the enemy. there are a lot of reasons for that. Some of them certainly unique to our times and something you're not going to find an analog to in ancient Greece, like cable news and social media. I think has had a lot to do with creating that kind of an intellectual environment today. I think most people really are reasonable if you sit down and talk to them, but the reasonable people tend not to be the people who get deeply involved in politics. Present company accepted, of course. But you know, like most people, you ask them if they want universal child care, and they say yes. You know, that there's this myth the corporate media has peddled for decades that we can't have social programs because Republican voters don't want them. And we can see when you separate the Democratic cultural signaling from Democratic, what we associate with Democrat policy priorities, they pass overwhelmingly in referendums in these deep red states that vote for Donald Trump. They vote to legalize marijuana. They vote to tax the rich. They vote to raise the minimum wage. These are not really the things that people disagree about. I think when you look at what's happening with this reconciliation package, I don't see how you convince people to go vote after that.
Right.
Because the system doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't work anymore. I haven't even really been going hard on Joe Biden on this. And certainly, yes, there are things that he could do that he should be doing. And he's, you know, yeah, I keep saying he's 5 minutes away from an all cream corn diet. So I don't know how much he has it in him to really do those things at this point. But that aside, what would you really do to get just a psychopath like Kristen Sinema on board? Like, what are you going to do to her? Like, what are you really going to do?
Well, I mean,
other than to like literally kidnap her, stick her in a, you know, torture chamber. Like, what are you going to do?
At the very least, they should be calling these people out, and they should be calling them out by name. Because
what's that going to do? I mean, I'm just talking about the outcome.
It's called going down fighting to this minute, and
Sure.
I've become Pramila
Sure,
Jayapal.
but the people don't give a shit about that.
I know, but
I'm saying the practical effect of it is meaningless.
Well, I think, well,
it's meaningful for us, but for the American
I don't
people,
know that
they're going to see.
I don't know that I agree with you. The people like the fact that Trump was a fighter, that Trump called out people, that Trump called out the media, that Trump was beleaguered. You know,
Sure.
I think really that was a very appealing quality for people that didn't even like his policies. And the thing about it is, and I just wanted, you know, Keaton, I said I wanted a minute to share my perspective on this election night.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I didn't see that message until just a minute ago.
From January on, I've been criticizing the doorknobs, as they're called, Jimmy Dore, for being a cynical nihilist. For 10 months now, I've been criticizing them because I have come around to the idea that, you know, these two expressions that I used to abhor, politics is the art of the possible, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. As an activist, I abhorred those expressions because I always wanted to fight for everything, the $6 trillion. But I came to accept that the $3.5 trillion compromise had some very, very major material benefits and would, in fact, it would not be exaggeration to call it the biggest social spending program since the Great Society and the New Deal. Okay, but then what did we have? We had, you know, the progressives and the people out front, at least on social media and in the cable news, being Pramila Jayapal and Ro Khanna, both of whom I liked, both of whom who have been on my show, both of whom I can get in touch with personally, pretending that they were going to fight for this. And over the past couple of weeks, we've seen them do nothing but cave, to the point where, as recently as yesterday, just when I thought they couldn't go any lower, they couldn't cave any further, because they essentially said they were going to vote for this shit bill that has nothing left. They then said, we're going to vote for it anyway because we trust Biden to get man on board.
Hold on, let me just clarify what you just said there, because it's important for people to understand. What you're saying, you were where I was, where you thought they were going to cave and take the 175. What they're doing now is worse. they're going to push both the bipartisan bill through and the 1.75 through. And then the quote that I guess Ro Khanna gave to CNN was, we're going to take a leap of faith that Joe Biden can twist Joe Manchin's arm. After all of this chest pounding, you're going to take a leap of faith? I'm going to tell you, Ro Khanna is a worthless coward. Worthless fucking coward, period. Jayapal, worthless coward.
Well,
Anybody who goes along with this is worthless. Hold on. Let me just admit our first caller into the room. She's a caller and a friend of the show and a candidate for Arizona's 5th congressional district as of now, although it may have been redistricted somehow. We got Lara Hodge, who is joining in right now. I'm admitting you, Lara. You're on the mic. Your video is turned off. If you care to turn your video on, you can, or you can stay audio only, Lara. Either way. Lara, can you hear us? There you are. All right, I see you.
Lara.
Say something.
Yeah, I had you in both places.
All right, there you go. So here's Lara Hodge. Our listeners know Lara. What's up? Thanks for joining the party here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right. So what were you saying?
Well, Jayapal, I mean, I almost felt sorry for her having to like swallow the shit and then say the line, well, and we did what we said we were going to do. Like,
It's disgusting. It's disgraceful.
How do you
it's
get
embarrassing.
through that?
Well, because look, I feel the same way that Lauren does, because I didn't think I felt the same exact way that Lauren did regarding the whole Jimmy Dore situation and sort of just being invested in spreading around the idea that these guys are useless from the jump and not giving this a shot. This was the best shot that we had, whether you think it was a good shot or not. This was the shot to do something not even big, but big by comparison to anything that's been done in the last 40 years. And what Lauren is feeling is the same thing I'm feeling, is that they embarrassed not just themselves, but they embarrassed us. They embarrassed Lauren and I, because now we have to eat shit and say that Jimmy Dore was right all along, because he was. Let's be fucking real about that. He was, because, and it's not the really great wisdom. It's just that, like, because they are not willing to tank the bill. If you're not willing to tank the bill, then you may as well not do any of this, because you're up against people who are willing to tank it. And you're never going to win a staring contest with people who are willing to tank it. You're always going to blink first. So it does not fucking matter. Not at all. We have another caller who's going to join in. L. I'm assuming this is Elvira, because you're L. But let's see.
By the way, the first rule of politics is Jimmy Dore is always.
Jimmy Dore is always right. Yeah.
No. Listen, I want to speak to that. Actually,
get out of all of this. It's the Jimmy Dore is always right.
I know you, yeah.
Is this Elvira here?
Oh, hi. How are you?
Hey,
what's up, Elvira?
I was just laughing because I have the video off and I didn't know that, but that's okay.
All right. I mean, you can turn it on if you'd like. It's up to you. I just like to give people the option.
So Jimmy Dore, and I think actually, is it Elvira? One of the people who follows us a lot really, really hates him. Is that you, Elvira?
Yeah, that's her.
Is that Elvira? Okay.
How are you?
Oh, hello.
So in keeping with that, yeah, I think I've said this on the show. Look, I can see the problems with Jimmy Dore. I have my own issues with Jimmy Dore, but I got to say, he's always been right, basically. Like he's been saying since the Bernie days, you're just being sheepdogged into the Democratic Party. They're not going to deliver. It's bullshit. Bernie should have run as an independent. And we all said, well, no, look, he's trying to work within the system. And I believe that. I don't think there's any corruption there. I believe he's genuinely trying. But Jimmy Dore has been saying all along, it's a waste of time. It's a graveyard for progressive ideas and movements. And he keeps turning out to be right. Like I've been exactly where you've been, Lauren, like where I'm like, no, forget about it. He's just, and every single time I wind up being wrong. And you know, it's funny that I would even think that, because I tend to win money on predict it. And I have a very simple technique. When it comes to betting with the Democrats, what's the worst thing they could do? Put your money there.
They'll do it. Yeah,
You'll never lose. You'll
You know
never
what?
lose.
I need to be a director for a second and tell Elvira that because that light, the camera is shining into the light, we can't see your pretty face.
Yeah, I know. I'm in a bad spot, but
Are you able to put that in front of you somehow?
yeah, I usually don't do these. I usually stay off camera because I like being too comfy, you know.
Well, you don't have to.
Yeah,
You
put
can,
it there. That's so
whatever you
much
want.
better. So
Yeah, I don't know how to.
Now we can see it better.
Yeah, I don't know how to really get it in front of me, but
Well, where you had it was good. Can you prop it up somehow?
I'm like sitting right next to a little light. It's maybe a 40-watt bulb.
Just got to get it out of the camera because it's changing the whole, what do you call it? White
Oh,
balance.
there you go.
Mise en scene.
There you
There
go.
you
And I gotta hold it here all
That looks
day.
great. That looks
You're gonna have
perfect, Elvira. That looks great.
What women do for beauty, right?
Can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
So the question was raised. I think Lauren asked, "Is this the trajectory that just keeps repeating?" And then Russell was talking about the collapse of democracy. I would take it as, and then we mentioned people like Roe and Pramila and who else did we mention? Some of these people that we feel disappointed by. I would take it out of the realm of personalities or cinema, right? We were talking about Kristen. I think it goes back to the Democratic Party being the lead instrument of neoliberalism, which started in the 70s. And Jimmy Carter was the Kristen cinema of his time, because he had a left wing of his party, of the Democratic Party, with Ted Kennedy and others, pushing him to go left on a whole bunch of things. He was the person of fiscal restraint and saying these things can't be done. So despite after the end of the Vietnam War, there were all these needs that people had felt that needed to be fulfilled. He sort of put a block on all of that, instead raised interest rates, wanted to break the back on inflation. We got Paul Volcker, and then we got Ronald Reagan. With Clinton, it just lasted a few months, a couple of years at most. Then you had the Gingrich Revolution. He was also fighting with members of his own party. There was a left wing of the party in the first couple of years of Clinton that was pushing him hard. Then you go to Obama within a year and a half, I think it was, where you lost, was it the Senate? And then you're fighting members of your own party to pass through this neoliberal initiative, which is the ACA. Even that, is diluted by the time he's done with it, and his presidency is almost fatally weakened by the time he's done with that. So it doesn't have to do with Roe and Pramila and Sinema, whatever. There are always going to be within the party these people. Like I said, it's interesting that it was more at the top with Jimmy Carter. Now these are people more, lower down the scale, not the presidency, although Obama is a different case. So it's this party. I mean, Jimmy Dore's right. The people who expected through DSA and Jacobin, these for the party to give people something, for there to be some reform, it's not ever going to happen. So that's the institutional basis of it, and it's that neoliberalism has been taken to this such an extent, and the pandemic just exploded that with housing, the housing crisis, these tent cities all over the country, in all the major cities. And looking at the reason why you have a closer race tonight in New Jersey, the governor's race, or in Virginia than you would have otherwise. Imagine if they had done the reconciliation bill, and even though I don't think that's revolutionary, that's just even 3.5 trillion, I think would have been just like 1% of GDP per year. So it wasn't that much, but there was some stuff in there with the paid leave and permanent child tax credit. There's, universal pre-K, there's stuff in there. But even that they couldn't do. And so you have these close races, and we're heading into a very bad situation, which has happened under, Carter, Clinton, Obama. We've been through this exact scenario in the past, and it's not accidental. It's not that you have these difficult personalities like Sinema who are just, devil figures who don't know what they're doing. The party as a whole knows exactly what it's doing, is to perpetuate this system. And one last thing I want to say is I've started looking at these races. If you look at the mayoral races in Boston, less so in Atlanta, Seattle, Buffalo, those are interesting races. There is recognition of some of the realities on the ground, especially of housing, homelessness, how that's bubbled to the top and has become almost a centerpiece of discussion. What we saw last year after George Floyd and the protests and racial justice movement, that's been simplified and diluted and distilled into what they are now calling public safety and crime. So that's unfortunate, and people and the more progressive candidates have generally backed off of revoking qualified immunity or defunding the police. But it is making its presence felt, that issue of racial injustice, even though it's very distorted already in this neoliberal frame of public safety. And housing, is now perhaps a dominant issue in these mayoral races. But when you compare that to the state level races, you realize the unreality. And this comes back to Russell's point of the political system being completely broken, how different they are. At least at the lower levels, they are talking about some real stuff, even in weird ways. But when you get to the governor's race, it's like, mandate, vaccination, or not to mention Beloved. We're talking about Toni Morrison and Beloved and this Carlisle guy in Virginia. That's the thing, right? So this is not just private equity. This is the private equity group. This is Carlisle Group, which was in the late 80s and early 90s, the scariest of them, with Bush and these defense guy, Carlucci and so on. We're not even talking about BlackRock and Blackstone and what are the other, private equity funds that emerged later in the 90s and 2000s and the next decade. This is Carlisle Group, and he was a COO of Carlisle Group. This is the head guy, Youngkin, I'm talking about. And yet
you got Rick Scott, who is the head of HCA, which is ruining Mission Hospital here in Asheville. It's taken it from a top hospital to the dregs. You can't even imagine how many doctors have left. The nurses have finally unionized. We'll see if that does anything. He became, he was the governor, and then he became the senator of Florida. What's happening right now is, what David Sirota said on Brian Stelter, who's the media critic for CNN. He said, one thing is the American media getting wrong? And he said, not covering the campaign contributions to these politicians. And that's exactly what's going on. Let me see it. Harold Meyerson from the American Prospect wrote something today that I want to read. It's just a couple of paragraphs from his essay. It says, his essay is called Memo to Media, Stop Calling Manchin et al. Moderates. He writes, so what do we call these non-moderate moderates who for reasons of their own have broken ranks with their fellow Democrats and President Biden? How about OMT Democrats, only money talks Democrats? And that works for most of them. I'm not sure it does justice, though, to Joe Manchin, who increasingly seems a character of Dostoevsky in perversity. With each passing or blocking day, Manchin comes across as a creature of steadily mounting rage against fellow legislators who don't pay him sufficient obeisance, who fail to recognize that this is really all about him. On one issue, paid family leave, he has positioned himself as the sole but sufficient bulwark against making sure that Americans in need, most particularly mothers of newborns and sick children, must choose between work and parenting. There's a term for this that is far more accurate than moderate. The mot juste for Manchin is motherfucker.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean, that may sound like provocative, but I have to disagree with Sirota. He's personalizing it. And I don't think personalizing it is any kind of explanation. Even campaign finance and money donation. I mean, there's a bigger problem going on here with our political economy, and it is reflecting now in the broken political structure. So as I was saying, if you look at the governor's race, and then when you go to the higher levels, when you go to the president or Senate, it becomes even more abstract and disconnected from people's lives. It just becomes more and more removed from reality. It has become completely unreal. It is not about Manchin. If we wanted to bring him in line, what would Trump do to someone in his party or George Bush. We've forgotten W and how he was treating people who are not willing to walk in line behind him, right? So in a second, they would just like, that's a non-issue. We have created these figures as if, Manchin is an independent personality on his own. He is not. So the question becomes, who are these people? And are these just some members of the elite? And do they also is there also broader support in the population for these kinds of ideas when it comes to, which is our founding mythology, our continuing mythology, personal responsibility, hard work, you're responsible for your own condition, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to these tent cities, what is the attitude of the people? Forget Manchin and these
I think people
devil
are
figures.
that,
What
though.
is the attitude of regular bourgeois people, white, middle class, brown middle class, whatever, going around their business? How are they treating these issues? And why are these issues there? It cannot be that these figures have come out of nowhere and have become so powerful that they have taken over our political system. There is nothing.
You can't
I think
say
that's
that. There are two schools in the country. I'm in North Carolina right now in a purple city, I guess you could call it. I mean, Asheville itself is pretty blue, but in the surrounding towns, it's red. And so you could say it's purple. And I'm in nextdoor.com. Every day there's raging debates about the mask mandate, where there's liberals who are saying this store is not enforcing the mask mandate, we shouldn't shop there. And then the conservatives are saying, if you don't want to shop there, don't shop there, but stop being a tattletale. And, the fact of the matter is, there are two zeitgeists, and it doesn't have to do just with neoliberalism. There's always been this personal responsibility versus the collectivism in this country. I mean, back from the founding days, even before neoliberalism. And I don't think Harold Meyerson, it wasn't Sirota who wrote that article. I don't think Harold Meyerson is disagreeing with you that it's a systemic thing, but the system that he's talking about right now is money. I mean, and this goes back also to the beginning of our country. People are going to go with who enriches them. Not everybody has this sort of altruistic community collective spirit that they go into public office with. And even those who do, and I've seen it time and time again, Pramila Jayapal was a community activist. Mark Ridley Thomas, who is just now asked to resign from the Los Angeles City Council because he worked with some officer at USC to provide this professorship for his son, his useless son, and now he's being indicted by the FBI. This guy was a community organizer during the Rodney King civil unrest. I mean, look what happens. People get co-opted. They get co-opted by the institution. Even Bernie's been co-opted by the institution. He's tweeting now that, everybody wants Medicare to negotiate with Big Pharma. It's a very popular program. It polls well. I am not going to, allow this, to be taken out of the bill. But you watch, he's going to vote for this. Bernie Sanders, who inspired so many people to get involved in politics, to run for office, to reform the Democratic Party, to do whatever they think they're doing, Bernie Sanders is going to fold, just like Jayapal, just like
look,
Rocco.
much of this has to do not with who's been co-opted or not been co-opted. I mean, co-opted is one way to say it, but they've been co-opted into what? These are people who are at the end of the day going to do what is best for the party. It seems like the progressives, like the ones who we think of as these like well-meaning folks who get in there and try and fight the good fight. They are ultimately going to have to do what's best for the party because they are actually sincerely afraid of what the Republican Party represents, whereas Manchin and Sinema are not. Manchin and Sinema are willing to tank the party, obviously. And so if you're not willing to tank the party, then it's only a matter of time before you get outfoxed and you get outlasted. There's no point to any of this showboating if at the end of the day you care more about the party than these principles that you're fighting for. And that's what we're seeing here. Joe Manchin cares more about not giving old people tooth fillings than he cares about Democrats winning the midterms. And the progressives would love to give old people tooth fillings, but they're not willing to die on that hill if they can't. They are ultimately going to do what they feel is best for the party, perhaps because to a certain extent they've been co-opted institutionally, but also I think they genuinely fear a red wave. Let's toss to a couple of our more soft-spoken guests here, and let them get a word in. Mr. James Nagy, our most recent contributor to the blog, what are you thinking about all this?
I wish I had a clear answer. I honestly, between listening to Anise and Lauren, it's they both make excellent points, and I'm like Reb Tevye, you Anise, you are right. Lauren, you are right. Reb Tevye, they can't be right. You are right. I'm just soaking it all in at this moment. However, I will say that.
Fair enough.
Russell's tongue-in-cheek article about how progressives should primary Republicans in red states, which I know we have our guest who is doing that very thing. I mean that in earnest. I think we're trying to take over the wrong party.
Yeah,
all right, well, that's a perfect
actually
agree.
may have given me that idea. I might have just taken credit for it.
You did.
I don't remember, but he says he gave me that idea.
No, it was
I believe him.
It was 30 days to like 1 month to the day from the day I texted Keaton about possibly running as a Republican to when your article came out. I still got the idea from you guys, so it's irrelevant.
Oh yeah.
No, but
I
what
think-
Russell's
I think
saying is he got the idea from
James.
Oh. Well,
Yeah.
Laura,
Well,
are you gonna
I don't know exactly. It could be parallel development.
Oh, remember Sam Ronan did that. Do you guys remember who Sam Ronan was?
mm-mm.
Rings
Sorry?
a bell, actually.
He ran for Democratic Party chair the same year that Keith Ellison ran and Tom Perez ran. Sam Ronan was a burner, and he was probably the fourth one. And then he decided to run for Congress as a Republican. He didn't win.
Sure.
Well, that's what Laura's doing right now.
Yeah.
And how's that going, Laura?
for what?
We need that here in Madison Cawthorn's district because we have all these Democrats running against him that don't have a chance.
Yeah. So far in the race on the primary on the Republican side, it's me, Andy Biggs, and one other person that doesn't have any online presence so far. And there's a lot of Democrats that have their name in the ring, but nobody that stands out.
Well, I thought a way to get signatures, and I'm not even really joking about this. Go to outside, like just hang out in the parking lot of like a Gander Mountain, like an outdoorsman store. And no, because like you are
I told my husband we need to go to do the gun store.
You need to do the gun stores.
Yeah.
Yes, the gun stores are the way to do it because it's the easiest thing to do. You hang out outside the gun store, you have the sheet there, and you just grab people and you say that Andy Biggs is a pussy on the Second Amendment. Just call him a pussy on guns and they'll sign.
Yep.
I mean, the ads would write themselves, man. It would be beautiful. Like just say like, whatever. Andy Biggs says he supports the Second Amendment. But did you know that Andy Biggs thinks it should be illegal to shoot someone against their will? In Laura Hodges' America, the American people decide who they shoot and why without big government getting in the way.
Where's
Boom.
the
Signatures.
Those
You get the signatures. Boom. Not even close. But that is a way because you have to go where those are engaged voters. All right, we have another caller who is joining here. I assume this is Mr. Ruiz. I don't know of any other Davids who are on the stream right now. David, is that you? Hello, David. Are you there? I heard you very faintly, though. David, can you hear me?
On my screen it says he's connecting. I don't know.
Oh, he's right. Yeah, his microphone.
All right.
is
So
not live.
meanwhile,
Can I give you guys a
Jim-
quick update?
Oh, go
Sure.
ahead. Go ahead.
So they have put out the Independent Redistricting Commission, which I thought was better than the Republican legislature, has put out some draft maps that are so gerrymandered. But running as a Republican, that actually helps me, so I don't really care. They've gotten down to the final drafts of the maps that they are putting out for public comment. And they basically cut a chunk of the northwest off of my district and added it to the northeast of my district. And they are planning to do a final vote on December 22nd. So I've kind of like paused my show and everything until those maps are out, just so I don't have to make a whole bunch of retractions. But once they finalize those maps on the 22nd, I'll really jump into my on the ground campaign.
Excellent. Elvira, your volume is a little bit loud. If you want to talk, then you absolutely feel free to talk. But when you're not talking, Elvira, if you could just mute the mic, just because we're getting a little bit of bleed from your computer, and it's creating a little bit of an echo. But if you want to talk, absolutely, by all means, talk.
Okay. I asked Lara where is she from. This other guy you've been talking about.
You're breaking up a little there, Elvira.
Yeah, what's the strategy? Is it Democrat? Yeah, this is all.
You're breaking up a little there. We really
So what
can't.
strategy
I think this is gonna work.
that she's using?
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll take that question. I'm just going to mute you for a second, Elvira, just because it's breaking up a little bit. Yeah, she was just asking Laura what your strategy is to get signatures to get on the ballot.
I'm kind of going for under the radar, quiet. The requirement is something like 2,000 signatures. When I go for a little more than that, but I'm not going for big splashy radio, TV, whatever. No, I'm just planning on going to events and talking to people. I haven't done any on the ground events, and I've done one podcast interview, and I've got 36 signatures already without having, really done anything.
Yeah, hit those parking lots. I'm serious. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Like candidates do that all the time. Go to
Mhm.
where the base goes. Like
Mhm.
you got an outdoor stuff. Whenever like some lefty groups organize protests and they really want to start shit, I'm serious. That's where they go. They go outside the Gander Mountain stores because they know all the right wingers are going to drive by and give them the finger and they're going to scream
Right.
back. That's what they do.
And
for fun.
also, I don't, for Elvira, I don't know if you know, I'm also a Navy veteran, and like the guy said, pro Second Amendment. So that's how I feel like I can have the justification to run as a Republican.
I'll tell you another thing. We had what we called a low income outreach project at LA for Bernie in 2015 and 2016. It wasn't my idea. One of our volunteers thought it up, and we would go to Walmart and Target parking lots, and also dollar stores and employment offices and check cashing places, payday lenders.
Mhm.
And we were basically talking about how, because these are non-voters, if you go for the likely voters, likely Republican voters are probably going to go for Trump types, and Democrat voters are going to go for Hillbot types. But if you wanted to get the non-voters, which is what Bernie Sanders' campaign was able to successfully do with paid people in 2020, and that's why he won California, you have to reach out to the low-income people who are non-voters and say, I understand why you've never voted, because there's never been any candidate who's represented your interests, but I will, okay? So that's, another suggestion for me.
Sure. I have people who have committed to volunteering for my campaign once I really get it off the ground. One that is actually really dialed into the sex work community in Phoenix, and another one that's heavily involved in NA in the area. And I feel like those are two groups that I can go spend a lot of time talking to and asking exactly, what do you guys need from Washington? And those are going to be the groups of people that, aren't necessarily registered voters and that aren't used to having their voice heard.
Yeah, and when you reach people that way, make sure you get their information so that come election time, you can then have somebody contact them and make sure they go vote. That's something I find that campaigns fail to do. They make great connections when they're canvassing, but they don't take names and numbers.
I actually had these notepads printed up, and they say, "What would you fix in Washington?" And then it's got a spot for name, address, phone number, whatever, and then whatever one issue would be the number one thing. And I've got these little ballot boxes to stick them in so nobody can open them and read them. But I take those pads everywhere I go with me, and anytime I end up talking to somebody, here, what do you think? What would help you? And then have their name, email address, phone number.
That's great.
All right, I'm gonna get my John King game on a little bit, if you guys don't mind. I'm gonna show us a little bit of a map of Virginia, so we get some results.
Snap.
All right, and here we
Snap.
go.
We're going high tech now.
We're going high tech right here. Can everybody see this map of Virginia?
Doesn't look good.
This production. Well, it looks great for you, Laura. You're a fucking Republican.
It doesn't look great for Virginia, though.
What are you complaining about?
Hang on, is this real time? Is this what
Yes,
it's
this
looking
is
like
in real
right
time.
now?
All right, this is in real time. So what we have is we have a little over
What
a million votes
percentage of the
cast,
vote?
36%
36%.
recorded. Youngkin up
Okay.
by 10. Now, here's what I would say. I mean, this red out here is, no shock.
yeah.
Richmond doesn't look like it's in yet, so that's a good sign
That's
for
helpful.
the Cheshire Cat Bear, Terry McAuliffe, the man of 1,000 teeth.
What's that by Norfolk that's not in?
Fairfax
There's that
looks
water.
okay for McAuliffe, but I'm not seeing how many what percentage. Oh yes, what percentage of votes are in from these? It's not saying how many votes left to count. The thing I would be a little worried about if I were McAuliffe is Loudoun County up here. This is a DC suburb. You would think he'd want to run up a better margin than that there. You see that's
Okay.
52-47. You would think that's a blue suburb of DC. You'd think he'd do a little more margin there. That's not as blue as Fairfax, but it's pretty blue. And so the fact that he's not really killing it there is probably a little bit of a cause for concern. Prince William, same thing. Like
Who's Princess Blanding?
she's the libertarian.
Yeah.
yeah. The great name, Princess Blanding.
I'm serious.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was amazing.
All right, so that's our little check-in with the map there. We'll cut back.
Well, Alexander Salmon, who you had on your show earlier this month, wrote a great article today in the American Prospect in which he talked about how McAuliffe was running the wrong campaign. Instead of talking about all the Democratic successes that they were able to achieve in Virginia, he's been, being not Trump. And, I don't know how that's going to work this time. It doesn't look like from these early results.
It's not going to work.
Going to work very well. But they were saying that in New Jersey, it is going to work because New Jersey is a solidly blue state. And the guy who's running for governor
That's a
there
mess.
is running on his record, everything that he's been able to accomplish that's progressive.
Yeah, probably. I mean, New Jersey is, it's kind of like New York City can flip Republican once in a while, but after Trump, it's going to be a generation before that happens here again.
I heard an interesting stat about New Jersey that I would not have known, which is that they have not re-elected a Democratic governor in like 40 years. They've had Democratic governors.
Really?
but
I
they've been
didn't know
one-terms.
that.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know that.
But
Always
they
one
seem to-
term.
Yeah. They seem to think he's going to pull it off.
They endear themselves so much to the population. But look, elephant in the room. Biden never had any natural base of support. And that's a very weak hand to play because when you're the president, shit is going to hit the fan. Those things are going to happen. When you have no base of support, your approval numbers are just going to collapse at those moments. And people don't really understand what's going on, and people usually don't. It's not really, most people aren't politics junkies. They're not following complex economics and international trade and stocks. What they know is that it costs $8 for a package of chicken in the supermarket. What they know is they were supposed to go back to normal, and this ain't nothing like normal. What they know is that the Democrats are still virtue signaling on vaccines and masks and treating it as a culture war issue rather than a medical issue. What they know is that the normal they were promised, which is the only reason they voted for the Pepperidge Farm guy with Alzheimer's, they didn't get that. They didn't get normal. And they had no particular love of Joe Biden. In the end, Joe Biden won by 40,000 votes spread out across 3 states. There was never this support for Biden. I knew exactly two people who literally thought Joe Biden should be president on his own merits and not just relative to Trump. They're both over 70 years old. Even
Ooh,
the
my
most.
mom's one.
What's that?
My mom was one. My mom is a huge Joe Biden fan.
You know, I mean, they exist, but it's hard to find them in nature. You know, it's a rare thing
Well,
that somebody really
he did win
devoted to
Virginia.
Joe Biden.
Bi-
What's that,
Biden,
Anise?
Biden won Virginia by 10 points.
But he did very well in Virginia, but
Yeah, but those were
everybody
votes against Trump, not for Biden.
and also their votes against Trump, and not only that, and I've been saying this for years. I've been screaming this at the top of my lungs at Democrats for a very long time. People don't like you. They're not with you on culture. They're not with you on culture. When these things turn to culture war, you're going to lose every time. You'll win in, you know, deeply. You'll win in Portland. You'll win in Seattle. You're not going to win the country on culture. So the only thing that you can do is win on economics.
Yeah.
Now, if you do not deliver on economics, then the elections become about culture and you're going to lose. And that is essentially the story of the Democratic Party post-Clinton. All of these elections end up being culture elections because they're not doing shit for you economically. So what the fuck are you going to vote for the people who want to run your schools based on niche academic theories about race and gender? Most
you guys
people
were
are not
talking about
with
this on the last podcast that just came out, and I totally agree. Like if we're not going to do anything with this money that's worth it with climate, then fuck it, let's take that money and put it into something that's actually going to help people and actually make a material difference in people's lives, because otherwise never going to get voted for. Like when we can't make a difference, which obviously the Democrats are incapable of doing, as they have shown over and over and over and over again, that what are we even doing?
Well, that's my argument for running as Republicans, because we're about to turn into a one-party state anyway.
Right.
You know, so what the hell are you gonna? What are you gonna do? Try to be a member of a different party within, like, you know, the Soviet Union? You have to be a communist. Like, that's the only game in town. The Republicans are about to be the only game in town.
How complicit do you think the Democratic Party is in the culture wars, as far as, you know, Nancy?
Very.
On a 1 to 100, like 99?
No, they just want you talking about that, so you don't see what they're doing, you know, capitulating on these material issues.
Of course.
Of course.
That's
That's been the tactic the whole time.
Oh yeah,
And that's why you have a whole generation.
Democrats.
You have a whole generation of people who think that being left is having a very strong opinion about who gets to pee where, because that's what they've been taught being left.
Look how Matt Taibbi is being excoriated right now by the left on social media for calling this shit out. You know, he's talking about cancel culture. He's talking about Robin DiAngelo, who, by the way,
is a moron.
Right? I'm in Asheville, and you've got all these, you know, guilty white liberals who are pretty privileged, at least the ones that are talking about this are, you know, in these Facebook groups, tut-tutting. One of them lectured me how I ought to read Nice Racism, which apparently is just a rehash of white fragility. You know, if she's got a winning formula that's going to bring in the buck, she's going to keep milking it as long as she can. And, you know, they don't understand. You know, and when I say something against it, then it's like, ooh, our Black city councilwoman asked us to read this book, you know, and I'm like, okay, well, if you don't want to take it from this white progressive, what about Adolph Reed? What about this guy, Warder, Dennis Warder? You know, these are two Black men, one of whom is a literal professor of racism, you know, saying that this is bullshit, you know, and that it's just one step away to this critical race theory. And you know what? I hate to ever agree with the Republicans.
As soon as they got on this, I said, God damn it. Now I'm not going to be able to make the case. Now, any lib you try to argue against critical race theory, now the Republicans took up this fucking cause, and that's it. Mind closed. That's it. You're not going to be able to argue this with them.
You know, yes, I get it. Okay. We live in a system of white supremacy. All right. Everybody's a racist, because if you accept the definition that racism equals prejudice plus power, You can't have reverse racism because, blacks can't be racist against whites. Maybe they can be prejudiced against whites, but they can't be racist. So then you have to talk about the question, well, can blacks be racist against brown people and brown people be racist against black people?
That's where this goes.
And then you're having these conversations, and there was a guy in the Racial Justice Coalition who, when I quoted Matt Taibbi's article, he said, looks like a white supremacist mixed in with a little fragility. So I wrote, oh, you've got all the politically correct words in there, smiley face, meaning I was making a joke. And he comes back with 3 paragraphs about how I was making a microaggression against him.
That's what I'm saying. Lauren, when you deal with these people, be honest. When you deal with these people, doesn't some part of you want to go vote for Donald Trump? Like
No,
just to fuck them.
You know what it makes me want to do?
I have said that before. Dealing with those people makes me understand. Like, okay, so I come out of a theater background, and in the school of method acting, I'm supposed to use the magic if. What if I were this? What if these were my circumstances? Right. So for me, I say, okay, so what if I were a guy who lived in a formerly prosperous town somewhere in the Rust Belt that now is an opioid addicted hellhole. And now I'm delivering pizzas and I'm working at Walmart and I'm doing something else part-time to make the same wage I used to make at my factory that they shipped to Mexico. And somebody's telling me to check my privilege on social media and screaming at me about my beliefs about gender. Who do I vote for? I vote for Donald fucking Trump. Okay, so I am only Democrats, 3 bad jobs away from being a Trump voter.
The Obama Democrats in the Rust Belt did that, and that's where Hillary didn't even go and campaign because she took him for granted.
Yes, she did.
She
All right,
did.
while we're on this topic, I'm
saying yes, she took them for granted. Sorry.
While we're on this topic, all right, I've been meaning to bring this up. I've been wanting to bring this up. I'm surprised I lasted this long. So we have Anis Shivani here. Anis, most of our followers know you for your political writings, but you are actually a published poet as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yep. So I want to get a poet's opinion on this because a video that came out, the transgender black woman who led the Netflix walkout against the Dave Chappelle special, right?
Right.
She's under fire from some people because she was calling Dave Chappelle a transphobe, and turns out she made several very bigoted, insulting statements as well, right? Now, she's obviously a horrible person, and I don't condone any kind of like racial insults, but I want to get a poet's opinion on this one particular insult that she had, because I thought it was, I think it's just fantastic. There's so much poetically working
and don't
there.
forget, she's very proud of the social equity that she, quote, pours into the Netflix space. Go ahead.
Okay,
quote,
so she threw an insult at this woman.
Equity
her line against her was, you fat Mexican piss blonde Miss Piggy looking bitch. Now,
really specific imagery.
Now let's take out the Mexican part because I don't like the racist part of that. But piss blonde Miss Piggy looking bitch, I think is wonderful. I think you have rhymes there. You have piss and miss, and then you have the slant rhyme, right? Is that what they call it? Slant rhyme, bitch, piss, miss, bitch. And then you have the piss and piggy. So you have the matching P sounds at the front, right? What do you think of that? Just as a poet, how good is that? Piss blonde, Miss Piggy looking bitch.
This is Dave Chappelle's own response to this.
No. This was a black woman insulting another Mexican woman. Oh, she tweeted out that the woman was a piss.
The black trans woman
who led
organized the Netflix walkout, which wound up being, I believe, 28 people, as opposed to the media's projection of 1,000. And she has a history of tweeting horribly racist things, homophobic things, remarkably. She really has a thing about Asians. So like Asians are like every other.
That horrible history. That's the one who's protesting Dave Chappelle.
Oh yes.
And the insult is from whom to whom?
It's from the transgender woman leading the walkout to another person online that she got into a dust up with. We don't know.
Just play that portion.
They banned that video from Facebook, so I can't.
You
Good
can
stuff,
get
right?
it on Rumble on his
Yeah.
because
Oh, I know,
pulled
but
it
I
up
can't
the other
live
day.
stream it on Facebook, or else they'll throttle us.
They'll shut
Yeah.
us
Well,
down.
the insult is fine, but
Censorship. Woo!
Yeah.
Woo! Free country.
I like Dave Chappelle in general, and I've listened to some of his past stuff, and I really liked him. And then I was curious about this show that's causing all the fuss. What is it called? The Closer, or
Yeah.
right? So I can't venture an opinion at this point because I only saw part of it, like maybe 20 minutes or so. But as I saw more and more of it, I wanted to be in complete sympathy with him, with Dave Chappelle, because I'm against any kind of cancel culture, criticizing artists, writers, or anybody creative from expressing their opinion. You know that I'm 100% for all that. And yet it seemed to me like, as I watched more and more of it, I need to finish watching that show, that he was trafficking in ratings, or like this felt more inauthentic on his part, like something he had to do to be that's my initial impression. I'd have to watch the rest of it.
I would say watch the whole thing.
Yeah,
You
the thing
can't
about that
judge
special
that
is
special without watching the whole.
Yeah, and that was part of the flaw in constructing it, is that he was like, he wasn't cognizant enough of the fact that he's putting this out on streaming, where if somebody gets offended, they could just turn it off without watching the whole thing. And that's the kind of thing where you really have to watch it all the way through. Like the last 15 minutes really kind of turns the first hour on its head.
Okay. I can't venture an opinion now because I'm completely sympathetic to him. I like him a lot, so I'd like to watch it. But at the beginning of the show, it did feel like it was gratuitous, and it didn't.
Absolutely,
feel,
yes. I totally understand how you can have that impression watching the first hour. Absolutely, 100%.
Right. So I need to finish, and then I went back to Seinfeld binge watching because I was like, well, that's just much easier. So
yeah, Seinfeld is right. Seinfeld is right. Seinfeld is food for the soul. Seinfeld is a nice bowl of mac and cheese.
Isn't it? Yeah. So three seasons, 20 minutes of Chappelle, 3 seasons of Seinfeld, and I guess I'll go back to Dave Chappelle now. 20 more minutes.
David, you had your hand raised. You don't have to be that courteous.
I'm just trying to be polite here. I don't want to talk over people.
We're not polite people here. You know that.
We're freaking animals.
So yeah, I did. Huh?
Can you turn on your video so we can see you?
No, apparently I'm my battery is real low at 45%, so I'm just trying to stay on audio. Bear with me here. Sorry, Yes. Plus,
because he's got to watch the whole thing on the phone, apparently, right? Because you said
yeah. But
so he's got to
consider. I saw the special, and as the special kept unfolding, right, and he told that story about that trans comedian that he met. I felt kind of conflicted about his recanting of the story. Was he being earnest, or was he being manipulative to say that the trans community basically killed her through this bullying because of his, her interaction with him, knowing that he's become pitting himself as the enemy? I find myself conflicted, and I really didn't want to dwell on it because I knew this was the result was going to be that there was going to be backlash because of the popularity of Chappelle and still hanging on to the old ways of thinking. And to me, it's like, okay, you want a seat at the table. The people that were protesting apparently were protesting that one of the employees happened to be trans, who spoken out, had to be fired. And I think that was completely unnecessary because that just gave them a window of opportunity to basically start this campaign, and it had nothing to do with bringing him down. That's what I try to clarify to people that were very, I guess, reactionary to it. But at the same time, he has the voice. He has the comedic chops to really speak truth to power. As comedians, hold that truth, hold that value. So I really didn't want to get into that old, culture wars thing. And it's like, I'm for with putting a discretion notice. Like, okay, fine. If you're offended, we're gonna put this, in front before we show the special. That way you can feel safe. If you want that illusion of safety, fine, go ahead. But I'm not for the censorship.
Well, I'm going to weigh in on this real briefly because I've been looking as you've been talking, and Mia Satya, who is a trans friend of mine from California, did a two-part Facebook post on how, in fact, she feels that Dave Chappelle is responsible for Daphne's suicide. She and Daphne were personally friends. And I read it so many months ago, or a couple months ago. I don't remember it. I don't want to try to characterize it now, but I am going to put it in the chat of this Facebook show for anybody who wants to read it.
Okay. I honestly think a big part of the backlash is actually that. And it's interesting that nobody really wants to talk about it directly. Honestly, David, when you just brought that up, you're the first person I've heard actually bring up that point. The trans community does not want to talk about that. And beyond that community, people who regularly make a habit of getting involved in Twitter mob justice don't want to talk about that because it raises a much larger question that goes beyond the trans community. Should we really be handling things that way? And, you know, most of us, going back to what I was saying before, most people are reasonable. Most of us feel no. Who are these people on Twitter who bully people possibly to suicide? You know, I haven't read the post. I think it's convenient for a member of that community that may have participated in that pile on to deflect it to Dave Chappelle. But we know that 10% of people on Twitter generate 80% of the tweets. So who the fuck are these people? They don't represent us. They don't represent most people. And then it's a feedback loop. The media is constantly looking for controversy. So the 6 guys who are upset that an Asian woman is in Star Wars get blown out of proportion as if it's a fucking movement. It's 6 idiots in their mother's basement who are upset about this. It does not represent a lot of people. There's a country of what, 330 million people? How many fucking people are upset about racial diversity in Star Wars? But the media
People aren't even aware of it. Most people aren't even paying attention.
Well, the media makes you aware of it because they blow it out of proportion because they're constantly looking for these kinds of oppositional narratives that will give you this impression that it's a country that where everyone's at everyone's throat and are having it's very few people that have opinions that stupid. You know, it's not
in general, let everybody say anything they want. That's the
solution to bad speech is more speech.
Say everything. And I'm one of it. And I've always been for that. I also want to say that, you know, Dave Chappelle aside, whom I like a lot, American stand-up comedy seems to me, from what I've seen of it over my lifetime, is that it seems to be an interesting disguised vehicle to let into discourse all kinds of patriarchal, anti-feminist, sort of even subtly racist sorts of discourse that otherwise would not be allowed into mainstream discourse or primetime TV or whatever. And you can go back to Carson or the 70s or even earlier. And often it seems to be a vehicle to, and then they can say, well, I like to make fun of ethnicity or certain things I've observed about women and relationships, but often it seems to be a vehicle to, sort of an outlet for white bourgeois frustration, so that's also not something to be ignored. Again, I would like everything to be allowed by everyone, because otherwise, they're going to come after us, and they have big time, right? It's all being shut down because we, on the left, objected to these views that we didn't like, and now we're in trouble. We're paying the ultimate price for that.
All right, we have a Due Dissidence election break.
I was just going to ask if there's any more.
Yep, we're going to have an election break here. So as you can see, this is Politico's map, which I'm going to use now because they're actually reporting the percentage of precincts reporting.
And I didn't put any fucking money on this one.
You guys know historically Glenn Youngkin should win, right?
Yeah, sure.
Getting some feedback. Somebody.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback. Elvira, you just got to mute yourself until you speak because I'm getting feedback on your end. Unless you can lower your computer. I'm just going to mute you for a minute.
Nope, you're still
All
getting
right. Are we still getting it?
Why are we getting it?
Hello, 1 2 1 2. No, I think that was just maybe a delay. I don't hear it now.
Yeah.
You
I
guys
don't
hear it now?
either. No, it's
All
good.
right. Maybe it was because I was
No.
sharing my screen. Hold on. Let me
It's
do
the
something.
Buffalo mayor
That
race
shouldn't
today.
have
I
have
wanted
anything
to
to do
talk
with it.
about India Walton.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
please.
what I just was asking.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do it. Let me just do a quick break here so we can get some news. All right. No feedback. Everybody can see the map of the lovely Commonwealth of Virginia, correct?
Not good.
Mhm.
All right. So here's what we got going on here. So you got Yunkin up by 12 points here. You have Fairfax County, McAuliffe at 71.8,
That sounds
Yunkin at
right.
27.7. Only 7.6% of precincts are in from there. So McAuliffe still has a lot of room to catch up there. He can pad his total. What I'm hearing from the New York Times is that their target out of Fairfax County is 76% blue. And so they are trailing a little behind there. Not crazy behind, but that's the thing that could bite them in the ass if turnout is big out here. And as you can see, anything that's shaded striped still has precincts to report. So like these precincts out here are heavy red. And like this one, 83 for Yunkin, 16 McAuliffe, only 33% in there. So Yunkin still has ground to catch up there. 50% here where Yunkin's got big margins. So we're about half in. Overall, 50% of the expected vote is in. Yunkin's got a pretty good lead there. I mean, 12 points is not easy to catch.
Man, it's not looking
Doesn't
good.
look good, but it's not surprising.
No, what the
But,
voters of Virginia were not surprised by. We're not inspired by Clinton's money man reptile running for fucking governor for the second time. That
Yeah.
wasn't inspiring to
He
them.
was
They didn't want
not
to
a
run
bad
to the polls for
governor.
that.
Well, he wasn't bad, and he's better than the other guy. But we're running against history with voting.
Lauren, you
trends.
tried to post this in the Blue Revolution.
I did.
All right. Well, we have feedback from the admin of that group. I told you last time that group does not love our stuff. He says, "Hey, really appreciate you that he posted this on our comment here. Hey, really appreciate you trying to post this rubbish in our group where hundreds of us volunteered in Virginia. Nice to hear nothing matters from grown adults who know better. My 13-year-old punk rock persona calls and wants his edge back. Oh man, we can't fuck with these guys anymore, dude. They're burning us so bad.
What group is this?
I'm just gonna
feel
shrink into a puddle. I'm gonna start crying soon.
What group
Let
is
Jimmy
this?
know we could use some help. I'm not even gonna say it. I don't want to pick a fight with any of these people.
Sure.
Listen, one of the ways I have built this up as well as I have is I've stayed out of these kinds of fights because some of these bastards can be very vindictive. All right. Let Jimmy know we could use some help in getting out the message that child poverty was cut in half this year. Oh, that's right. We forgot child poverty was cut in half this year. Maybe he
Temporarily.
can come down from one
Yeah,
of his $1
yeah.
million
I didn't
homes.
even notice the
Yeah,
difference.
you know what? Tell him this year because in this shit.
You
bill,
tell him. I'm not telling him anything.
They
I'm
only
not
extended
Only
it
this
for
year.
1 year.
I'm not
They
getting
only
into this. I
extended
don't-
child poverty. So child poverty is only going to be cut in half for 1 year.
1 year.
Right.
Okay, well, do
Maybe.
you want child
Maybe we
poverty?
still don't even have we don't even have a consensus to vote on the bill.
Right.
Under Donald Trump, child
2021,
poverty is
it
not
was
cut in
a
half for no
very
years.
good year.
Nope.
My
For like till the end of
children
this
could
year.
eat. They didn't have to resort to pig's ears.
Let's go.
Does
Let's go,
anybody
Brandon. Can we do Let's Go
know what's
Brandon as a group?
Massage?
That
That,
All right. Should we do a Let's Go Brandon chant? Can we get that all going?
I don't know.
1,
I-
2.
I've only learned about it today, and I'm just already sick of hearing about it.
I love it. I can't get enough of it. I think it's great.
so let's
I
talk
know.
about
Yeah.
Did
India.
you listen to all the songs, David? They have like 4 different songs out. They have
I
country
mean,
songs, rap
it's
songs,
just
rock
one
songs.
more thing that makes this moment in history feel very dystopian sci-fi.
Right,
Let's
all
talk
right.
And they say
about
the right
India
can't mean.
Walton. Can we talk about India Walton?
Sure, yes. Let's
Yes,
talk about
please.
India Walton, the Democratic nominee, by the way.
Please.
The blue no matter who in Buffalo, baby.
Yeah, who the
Blue all the
Democratic
way.
Party, who the Democratic Party
David
didn't
Duke?
endorse, and who the state chair called, oh my God, I thought I was going to remember this for the show tonight, but he said something horrific
Yeah,
about
he
her.
compared her to
He
David
compared
Duke.
her to David
He
Duke.
said if
Yes!
David Duke won a low turnout
Yes.
primary,
Yeah.
would I
Yes.
have to endorse
A
him?
black
if he were a
woman, by the
Democrat?
way.
Right.
today.
Right.
Everybody came in, all the individual superstars came in and endorsed her, but this guy is still winning. And they're saying, and you know, this may be true. I've got to consult with Rob Galbraith, who's my reporter on the ground in Buffalo. He was on my show about Cuomo. Remember last year when everybody was saying, we should, when everybody thought Cuomo was handling the pandemic so well, and that we should put him in instead of Joe Biden. And I did, no, here's the truth about Cuomo. And I had my reporter from Buffalo. So I want to have him on to talk about this India Walton thing. But the mainstream media is saying that, you know, the reason she was able to win in the primary was it was an off-year election, that nobody was paying attention, that she got these non-voters. And what's happening now is the likely Democratic voters don't want her brand of socialism. And so they're voting.
They should have showed up in the freaking election.
In the primary, but they explained why they didn't. And they're paying attention now because of all this guy's ads. So they're bringing them in.
Sure.
Well, and also I've actually been following this because, you know, we've talked about this some on our podcast. You know, I'm trying to plot my post-pandemic life, and if I leave New York, one of the places I've considered is Buffalo because it's a quiet. No, hey, I'm thinking of my children and grandchildren.
Come to Asheville.
That house is going to be worth a fucking fortune when everyone starts fleeing from the floods, hurricanes, and wildfires. Like anything you buy in Buffalo now is going to have 1,000% gain over the next 20 years.
I already fled
I
to
guarantee
Arizona.
it.
That was
I guarantee it. But so I'm thinking about it like, hey man, get in first before it becomes San Francisco by the Great Lakes. And so, you know, I've been following this kind of closely for my own reasons, but other than it being interesting. And there was a late breaking controversy. Like, unless you followed this race closely, it didn't really make national news. She had called one of the city councilmen, who I guess was skeptical about the police defunding initiative or reform initiative. What did she call him? A tender dick white man?
Yeah.
So, you know, that wasn't that was the big news up in Buffalo. The final, that was the October surprise, that you called someone a tender dicked white man.
Well,
he sent me the same message, Dan McCool, and then he made it so I couldn't even respond to him. A real coward, that guy.
All right.
All right. So, but who's with the race? What's going on?
Call him a wanker.
They
hate that. They hate that. When
What's
you
that?
go British.
What's up with the race in Buffalo?
With the
you got
race
maps?
in Buffalo. Hold on. Okay. Let me get this.
She should win, right?
India.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think she's going to.
I'm pulling up the stuff.
From what I followed about the race, I don't think so. I think she won that primary on a fluke.
I did watch one of their debates with, is it Byron Brown? I can't know the mayor.
Byron Brown, yeah.
Byron Brown, right? So, you know, the way he was pissed off at her, because I think what Lauren was saying, the general consensus is that it was kind of a surprise. Everybody was taken pissed off at her because I think what Lauren was.
Yeah, total upset.
Right. So taken by surprise, the establishment, the current governor has not endorsed her. Schumer did. But it's interesting. She's a democratic socialist, but in the media, you only hear of her as socialist, period. They're just calling her socialist. And the kind of antagonism that I've heard in interviews, questioning her personal, you couldn't pay your fines and fees, and your nursing career, you dropped it, you failed as a community organizer, you failed at everything. And just like her past financial difficulties, they have been going after her like, I mean, you wouldn't believe it. But it's interesting to me, one thing I noticed in all these mayoral races where a year and a half ago after George Floyd, we had this ideal of defunding the police in mind, and now we have slowly come to even the most progressive candidates like India Walton, and there's an interesting race in Seattle, Lorena, I can't remember her last name, right? So she also is on
Lorena
Gonzalez, right? On the police issue in Atlanta, it's Kasim Reed. He's trying to make a comeback, and a couple of more progressive young African-American candidates who sound interesting. They are more progressive, but generally, wherever you hear, you hear that the conversation has shifted to public safety, crime, And we're no longer hearing about defunding the police or any radical, things. All we are hearing about is the most candidates, among whom I think is also India Walton, backing off a little or a lot from their earlier support for cutting back some police. So it is interesting, however, though, there seems to be agreement all over the country where they're saying now, okay, we should shift resources from policing activity to mental health support, to a lot of incidents. We should not be sending the police out there. So there's some talk about reallocation, but I think the entire radical agenda that we had heard in terms of policing, that seems out of the door, even in terms of these most progressive candidates like Lorena Gonzalez or India Walton. They walked back typically whatever they had said in the primaries or earlier in the year to get this far. So it's interesting that this is now simplified. I mean, George Floyd, racial justice movement, it became Black Lives Matter, taking the knee, and now it's gone to the other extreme of public safety and crime, and that has become the overarching issue other than housing, and that also is triggered by the camp cities in different cities, right? So that also is a public safety issue. So how do we go from George Floyd and these hopes and ideals that we had to public safety being the biggest issue?
Well, because there's no electoral vehicle for Black Lives Matter. There's no serious vehicle for that in a political space. If you're talking about politics with a capital P, right? There is an electoral vehicle for, Nixonian silent majority, law and order, style politics. And that's what you're seeing. So you're seeing that reaction on the right. That would be my short answer. Do you mind if I just take a little bit of a game break here to update us on Virginia?
Sure.
Hold on. Okay, I'm just gonna need a minute to bring this up. Hold on 1 second. Sorry.
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. Let's go. Let's go.
Just need a second.
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. You know what they saying, ho? Let's go, Brandon.
Okay, found it. Sorry, I just needed to do that little game break there. Just had, I had to keep you guys entertained.
That should be our new break music.
What's that?
That should be our new break music, man.
Oh,
I like that.
Should be our intro.
Yeah, that should be our intro. Yeah.
We should
fuck that drum fife shit.
should contact them and find them. Okay, I have it now. All right, here we go. It's so good. I just love it. I've been listening to that all day. It's been in my head all day. 60% of the vote in, as we can see here.
McCullough's toast. Man.
Close the gap a little
There's
bit.
no way
Down to 10.5.
There's no way he's gaining 10.
Yeah, well, this is bad here. This was not a good development for McCullough here. As you can see, Fairfax County now dipping under 70%. He's got to be. They're saying he's got to be at 76% or at least 75% margin there. In order to win. If he's now down below 70, that's not a good sign. Only 31% of precincts in, so there's still a lot of votes to be counted there, but that margin is not good enough for him. And let's see, where is Loudoun County? Loudoun County is here. Okay, so Loudoun County was not a great margin for him either, and that's almost all in. That's 98% in.
Well,
so I don't know. I'm not tuned into I'm not watching any CNN or any, what's the guy's name? What's the dweeb on MSNBC? Steve Kornacki. I'm not, I don't know what they're saying. I'm not getting any of that.
I mean, it would be amusing to watch what they're saying just to drink their tears.
Well, here, Russell, why don't you put your TV on and just mute it and see what they're saying? Because the thing that we can't do here that's very powerful that they're able to do on the cable channels is they can flip back and forth between the 2020 presidential race and this one to see how they're polling against Biden's performance.
In one of the reporters at the New York Times, Reed Epstein, is saying in Lexington, Virginia, where Biden won 65% of the vote, so this is Northern Virginia, McAuliffe is at just 50%. But
yeah, so that's way down.
So he's running behind, and it does not look good. However, the way it is.
All right, hang on. To do that, I got to put on my cable. Excuse me.
First is the early ballots. So those, and then the rural vote in favor of Youngkin, and then later in the evening with more Democratic. So there were supposed to be three, different shifts in the way this these results would appear. So I'm not
Okay,
sure.
well, I mean, Richmond is not in at all. I suppose
Oh.
that would be a good sign for McAuliffe that
Yeah.
Richmond is not in at all. Virginia Beach doesn't look good for McAuliffe. I would assume that's a somewhat blue area. Maybe it's more purple. I'd like to know how Biden did in Virginia Beach. I'll look that up when I have the screen to myself again. And then let's see, Roanoke County, 6135. That's only 2.8%. And see, look, what seems to be happening here is a lot of these quote unquote Biden Republicans, the moderate conservatives who went for Biden in the presidential race because they didn't want to die of COVID, basically, also are, taking issue with, as Russell has said, Terry McAuliffe, insisting on, keeping parents' opinions out of what their kids learn in school. I saw a poll that said that Youngkin was winning 59% of parents in Virginia. They did a parents poll. Now, the thing about that is parents vote. Like, parents are reliable voters. So if you're winning parents by that margin, that is tough to overcome, especially in an off year race. This isn't even a midterm, it's an odd numbered year, right? So you're talking about people who need to be hyper engaged in order to come out. And although they are saying generally turnout is up, a lot of that translates to Republican support because Republicans are fired up.
Right. It's fascinating to me as a writer that we are now talking about this Virginia race almost being decided on Toni Morrison and Beloved. And because I read that the what they're calling the education issue, which is like parents' rights. Youngkin calls it parents' rights, and McAuliffe statements that in a debate or whatever that parents should not have a say in what children are taught in school, which is a runaway issue. And I think I read that issue now is more important than COVID and the economy. I think I read that it's just a dramatic leap where some time ago it was lower down the scale, and now that's just jumped way above. So it's fascinating that he's
been
able
back.
to leverage that issue so much. And I'm not a fan of McAuliffe by any means. I mean, he's, for us in the 90s, he was one of the demon figures with the Clinton's chief fundraiser. I mean, he was just this money machine, right, to fund all these neoliberal candidates.
Yep.
And then DNC chair. So that's but looking at him recently in debating Youngkin, it was fascinating that I felt like if had there been no Bush, had neoliberalism continued uninterrupted without the war on terror and Bush, it would have been something like Clinton would have evolved into something like McAuliffe, which is much heavier on transgender, gay rights, abortion, etc., all these cultural issues, but very neoliberal, right? So he's, and Youngkin is criticizing him for saying, well, you're saying that if Virginia is good on transgender and gay rights and abortion and so on, you're going to bring companies like Amazon and Google and so on, right? So, and Youngkin is saying, well, that it doesn't work that way. And in a sense, that's right, because these companies don't care about, right, these identity politics issues. But that's what McAuliffe seems to come down to is bring jobs with these identity issues, just leveraged to the nth degree from where they were in the 90s. And that's basically his message, which is very easy to take apart, as Youngkin is doing.
Well, I think, I think part of that fact that he knows this is an off-year race where turnout is likely to be down, and he knows that he needs high African-American turnout in order to win, right? A Democrat can't win Virginia without high African-American turnout. And so I think that's what he thought he was doing when he was making that whole pitch about teaching Toni Morrison in these schools.
Is there anywhere that's not true?
Is there anywhere that the what's not true?
That the African American
That Democratic.
Oh no, well the African American vote is huge
depends on
for
turnout.
Democrats generally. I mean, there are certain states that are so blue anyway that they can overcome low black turnout, like where we are, New York, Massachusetts, not tremendous black turnout in Vermont. Democrats still do okay there. But let me just do something because I was
all
able
right,
to
election
find...
break, because now I have the MSNBCs on. So 6% in for New Jersey. It's looking good for Murphy. He's leading by about double, 66 to like 33 right now.
Okay.
But it's 6% in.
That's 6. Okay, so that's very early. All right. So what I have in front of me now, and this would be too confusing to put up on the screen because it's a lot of numbers here. But I have the 2020 Biden versus Trump results in Virginia by county. So in Loudoun County, with 98% of the vote in tonight, McAuliffe 55% to Youngkin's 44.5%. In terms of raw vote, you have McAuliffe at 87,000 votes, Youngkin at 70,000 votes.
Can you share
In
your
the
screen?
presidential race last year, you had Loudoun County, that same county, went for Biden 61-37. So pretty significant swing towards the Republicans in Loudoun County. Biden netted, 138,000 minus 82,000. So Biden netted about 50,000 votes, if my math is correct, a little more. Yeah, 56,000 votes out of Loudoun County in 2020. McAuliffe's only netting about 20,000 if he's lucky here. So that's a significant decline in Democratic performance at Loudoun County. So that is definitely a bad break for McAuliffe there. No doubt about that. I'm curious about Virginia Beach because I would think Virginia Beach would be bluer than it's coming out. So Virginia Beach.
I actually used to live in Virginia Beach.
Oh, really? What's it like?
A lot redder than you think.
Okay, so I stand
It's a
corrected
lot
there.
of military. It's mostly military.
Okay, but here's the thing, Laura. So Virginia Beach went for Biden 51-47 in 2020. It's going for Youngkin 58-41 tonight.
Because
So
they didn't go for Biden. It went against Trump. That's
right.
That's what happened there.
But I'm just saying, in
And-
terms of numbers, that's a massive swing if that holds
Yeah,
out.
of
So
course
Virginia
it
Beach
is.
is 52% of precincts in. Youngkin up by 17. Biden won that county by 5. So you're talking about
Yeah,
a
that
22
doesn't surprise
point
me at
swing.
all.
Yeah.
Listen,
So
I'm going to have to get off at 9 o'clock. Does anybody know that they actually agreed to a drug pricing negotiation provision today? And do you want to hear what it is?
Please.
Yes.
Well, who agreed?
The White House, Democrats on Tuesday announced an agreement on drug pricing reform coming out in favor of allowing Medicare Part D to negotiate directly with pharmaceutical companies for the first time since its creation, a move the drug industry has fought for nearly 2 decades. While the latest proposal is far weaker than the version passed twice by the House, even staunch progressives in both chambers are preparing to accept that it's likely the best they're able to get in the narrowly divided Congress. Here's what
Are
it is.
Manchin and Cinema on board?
Cinema's on board. It says here, it would empower Medicare to negotiate the cost for 10 of the most expensive drugs by 2025 and 20 drugs per year by 2028, while carving out exceptions for small biotech companies. Only drugs that have passed their initial exclusivity periods, 9 years on the market for some drugs and 12 for others, would be eligible for negotiation. And the government can use an excise tax to force pharmaceutical companies to the bargaining table. But to
that's incredible. Is that Dan McCool around? We owe him an apology, I think. I think we need to reach out to
You
him.
know what? They are getting it done.
They can only negotiate on February 29th.
Lawmakers and
Yeah,
outside
right. You can only negotiate.
the deal is likely to limit drug companies' price hikes to the 2021 inflation rate, not the far lower 2016 rate they had initially supported. But those inflation caps would apply to people on private insurance plans as well as Medicare and kick off at the beginning of next year. And seniors on Medicare would have a limit of $2,000 on what they pay for out-of-pocket medication. And then this article goes on to say what different representatives have to say about it, what different interest groups have to say about it, Bernie Sanders does not seem too happy about it, but it doesn't indicate, that he's going to vote against it.
You just lube Bernie up a little bit. You can fuck him in the ass all night.
Oh, gross.
You've been getting.
What a thing to have, image to have when I go to sleep.
Russell's been getting increasingly scatological lately.
Yeah.
I'm very salty.
What about balls?
But I mean, here's the thing. Okay, I just want to make a point about this. You see how the sausage is made. That's this expression about how the sausage is made. People, activists, ordinary people, they don't even think about these details. And what happens in my mind, if you're involved in the negotiations at this minute of a level, you can do cognitive dissonance in your head to say, oh, look what we got. And then the other side can say, okay, but we're not going to make it until 2028. And we're only going to make it 20 drugs, And that way, cognitively, I mean, people have to feel, okay, that their life has some sort of meaning and purpose. I mean, I'm putting myself in Camilla Jayapal's shoes right now. Here she's come, she's gone to do this job. And clearly, if she's honest with herself, she failed bigly. She did not get the transformational change she keeps tweeting about. But in her mind, she has to, resolve like she's done something, right? So when you're involved in these negotiations at this level, this is how you frame these wins. Not so much to the public, which is what you're doing, but also to yourself. I mean, think about it I know you don't like to think about individual people or individual psychology, Anise, but think about it from their point of view. I mean, these are a bunch of actors who are in charge of making decisions for all of us. So it's kind of important to figure out what's going on in their psychology and how they live with themselves and how they go to sleep at night. That's what I think.
Can I respond to that?
Of course.
So you did bring up the idealism of candidates, right? The hope we have in them, and also because you're from LA. So I wanted to ask you something about someone who comes across as an idealistic candidate, Michelle Wu, in Boston, whom I've been very interested in. I don't know to what extent all of you have been following her. So this is, she is Elizabeth Warren's protege, and she's very, very ambitious. If you read Michelle's story, from the age of 22, when she had a family, crisis with her mother suffering from schizophrenia, and how she went to Harvard Law School and the city council. And seems like Warren, she has been working very systematically toward where she wants to be politically. And now she's on the cusp of winning against her main opponent. Her opponent is Anissa Asabi George, who's the daughter of Tunisian and Polish immigrants, I think. So Asabi is married to a major developer. And it's interesting how it just all comes together. She's married to a developer, and she keeps talking about building home ownership as a solution to the crisis of inequality and economic troubles in Boston. And Michelle Wu, on the other hand, is, from all the candidates that I've seen so far, I mean, this seems to be the most progressive agenda of any mayor. So there's a municipal Green New Deal. And although I read that, this is the first major city to propose, I read that LA and New York City had proposed Green New Deals. Now, I don't know what happened to those. So I need to educate myself. I tend to be a little skeptical about something that's enthusiastically taken up by certain parts of the capitalistic, regime, the Green New Deal, what that's all about. But it seems like both at the national level with Build Back Better, they're trying to wrap up a lot of things in the Green New Deal, including housing, affordable housing. So Michelle talks about certain things like vacancy tax on properties that stay vacant and other ways to alleviate the housing crisis. But I'm curious what you think, Lauren, about Green New Deal at the city level. What does that mean? Can it work? And this goes back to our conversation at the beginning, is even if you have something like a city doing right things, is the overarching political economy set up in such a way that it can't work at the local level? What do you think of that? And have you followed her? What do you think of her? And
Okay,
her-
I haven't been following her, but I can tell you about the Green New Deal in Los Angeles. I mean, starting in 2012, I was working with a coalition to get Los Angeles to ban fracking. And then, you know, it kind of got bottled up, or what's the word, bollocksed up, whatever, in the city attorney's office, because it was being seen as a taking, you know, a violation of the takings clause of the Constitution. Like if fracking companies own the oil, you can't tell them that they can't take it. So we shifted gears a couple of years later to 2,500 foot setbacks. Like you can't drill 2,500 feet from a home, school, or business. And finally, in 2021, after I left, that got passed. So it's not necessarily a Green New Deal, but it is a regulation. And a regulation is the opposite of all these market-based mechanisms that are included in the Build Back Better plan, which I'm also going to post in the comments an article from In These, which talks about how it actually, these provisions in the Build Back Better plan that managed to stay in there, not the $550 billion tax credits for you buying a green car and stuff like that, but some of the other things actually made climate change worse because they incentivize these technologies like carbon capture and sequestration, which is bullshit technology, which only encourages more fracking. What you need is regulations to keep it in the ground. And that's what we are not doing. Also, I want to speak about, you know, California, and this goes back to a point that I was making about Ro Khanna at the beginning of the show. People probably know that he's been making a lot of noise about how he was getting all these, you know, energy company CEOs to testify before his committee, and he was really putting them on the spot, and he was going to get them to admit that they were perpetrating all this climate denial all these years. And my response to that was, so, you know, so they admit it, which of course they didn't, you know, they didn't admit it. What are you going to do about that? Meanwhile, the whole time that he was tweeting about these hearings and how, you know, transformative they were going to be, he allowed Rusty Hicks, who is the chair of the California State Democratic Party, came out of the building trades, by the way. I'll tell you a little story. I tangled with him back in 2013. The city of Carson tried to pass a fracking ban in 2013 because Occidental Petroleum wanted to build 200 new wells in a poor, low-income community of color that was already inundated with tons of toxic projects. This was a real environmental justice fight. Maria Elena Durazo, who is head of the LA County Fed, which is the local version of the AFL-CIO, has 50 unions in there, including the very powerful Building Trades Union, which has never seen a fossil fuel project that it hasn't supported, by the way, standing side by side with their bosses. She buses in 500 workers, mostly from IBEW and the Teamsters. They were all wearing shirts that said jobs for Carson. Even though there were only 34 permanent jobs, none of them would go to residents of Carson. They would bring in people from Bakken and Texas shale fields, and they weren't even unionized jobs. And she was sitting there, Maria Elena Durazo, who then runs for state senator on a no fracking platform. She was sitting there next to the $1,000 an hour lawyer, George Milstein, for Occidental Petroleum, thick as thieves, bringing down this fracking ban. Fast forward, 6 years later, Rusty Hicks gets elected to be the party chair over Delane Easton, who's like long past her time. She's not the most inspiring candidate. But nonetheless, Ben Hawk, who's a friend of mine, a progressive, inspired by Bernie Sanders to join the Democratic Party, to change it over, to take it over, he manages with a bunch of people, including R.L. Miller, who's the past chair of the Environmental Caucus, to get 50 members of the executive committee at last weekend's state convention, which was by Zoom, to put forward a motion, which they were sure they had the votes to pass, right? to ban fossil fuel money from the party. The Western States Petroleum Association is one of the most powerful lobbyists in the state of California. And the reason we couldn't get Jerry Brown to ban fracking or Gavin Newsom to ban fracking is because of all that oil money going into the campaigns through the state party, okay? Rusty Hicks violated his own promise when he was running for that office. He managed to block this vote by having a committee saying, oh, let's first vote on whether we want to have a committee to study this, even though they had a committee last year, and this was the committee's recommendation. So this is committee 2.0 now. And they vote, everybody votes for the committee. And then when they put this vote up to ban the money, they say, oh, let's throw that to the committee. And that's how they were able to get around the 50 people that were prepared to vote to ban fossil fuel money in the state of California, considered one of the most progressive states in the country. And Rusty Hicks, you know, came out of the unions. He came out of the building trades union. So one of the things that the Sunrise Movement and all these environmentalists want to talk about is the just transition. But the just transition is never going to happen as long as you can make $120,000 a year working in a refinery in Richmond. Solar installers aren't making $120,000 a year. So this is where we see ourselves right now. We've got unions on the same side as corporations and politicians who are, you know, in the state of California, they get support from both. They get support from the corporations and from the unions. So this is why, you know, we're all fucked.
Yeah.
Sorry
All right. On that note, let me take a 20-second
story, but it's a very illustrative story of where we are.
Let me just take a 20-second little break here. Not a break, but just to let everybody know who's watching. Phone lines are open. You can call in if you'd like. I'm going to paste the Zoom link here down in the chat. So if you all you got to do is click that link, and you will be admitted to the waiting room, and we will let you in on our election night watch party here. Nothing too new to report in terms of numbers. Still waiting on Fairfax County to come in largely, but yeah. So as of now, 64% have voted in Virginia, Yunkin 55, McCulloch 44.3. I'm gonna step out for 1 second.
Bye, guys.
Okay. All right.
Bye, but thank you so much for having me on. And I vowed that this is the end. I'm not getting involved in national politics anymore. I think it's just hopeless. And I'm tired of getting my hopes up. I'm tired of wasting my time. And I will always say to the day.
Well, this is why in the 70s, everyone ran off to a national.
I support a No, I'm not doing the best and the personal.
Mood rings.
No.
Counter groups.
I'm still going to be involved in local, organizing and activism, but national, it's just too corrupt. It's too fucked. So
for what it's worth, I would love the chance to pick your brain before you step away.
Oh, I'd be happy to help you. I love what you're doing running as a Republican. I think it's brilliant. Yeah.
Maybe Keaton can get us in touch later.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'll send you before I leave, I'll put in the chat here my personal email address and phone number.
Great. Yeah.
Before we sign off, Lauren, I just want to say, like, this is, and I'm not even joking about this. Like,
just to show you all
seeing
what's happening on MSNBC, the horror.
She looks surprised. Poor Rachel.
She's not as bad as you think she is.
Look, I'm not even joking about this, but when I say that, like, all this stuff in terms of like progressives acting like they were going to fight and acting like they were holding the line and we're not going to settle. Seeing them cave, I was so depressed about that and upset about that and frustrated by that yesterday. And I almost wanted to go live last night, but I figured I had to save it because we got to do 3 hours tonight. So, I didn't want to blow the whole load last night. And so I saved it. But you know what? That was when I discovered the Let's Go Brandon thing. And the Let's Go Brandon thing is just so refreshing after all.